Oh, we're on. ON, Outreach News. And thank you for joining us for this edition of Outreach News. Outreach News is a media blog program that provides awareness of and shares the stories of countless individuals and agencies who provide help to those in need. And now your host, Linda Knox.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for listening to and downloading to this edition of Outreach News. Today we have with us a very special guest, Attorney William L. Dawson, who is a criminal defense attorney in Cleveland, Ohio. And here's just a little bit more about Attorney Dawson. Attorney William L. Dawson is a charismatic, passionate, and influential speaker who carries his powerful message of what it takes to be an effective leader and law-abiding citizen in today's social environment to hundreds of schools, colleges, universities, organizations, and government institutions. Attorney Dawson is an author and who practices law in the federal system as well as Ohio state and appellate courts. William has dedicated his life to empowering a new generation of emerging leaders. As a defense attorney, William has tried hundreds of cases ranging from disorderly conduct to murder. So passionate about the law, William became increasingly frustrated with the number of people becoming victim to the legal system, simply because no one ever took the time to effectively warn them of the risk and consequences of their actions. This frustration inspired the creation of the Finish First development. Attorney Dawson, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, a criminal defense attorney. Tell me, what caused you to want to pursue such a great career in law, especially down the avenue of criminal defense?
Well, I'll be honest with you. Initially, my background is in finance, and I thought to myself I was going to be a Wall Street guru. But once I graduated from undergrad, I realized that it was a little more complex to break into that field, so I began working in the insurance industry as a claims adjuster. And as a claims adjuster, I dealt with attorneys on the regular basis, settling their claims. And I said to myself, I could do that. All I have to do is work hard, and I could be on the other side. So I began going to law school at night while working at the insurance company, and eventually I ventured and finished my degree and began working in law.
Wow. Oh, that's impressive. We really do thank you for going down that avenue. We really need good attorneys, and especially people who represent us in that area. And we're going to talk a little bit about that a little bit more. Tell me a little bit about yourself. You were raised in the Cleveland area?
I grew up in East Cleveland, which unfortunately, if you look at the statistics, it's one of the more depressed areas, not only in the Cleveland community and greater community, but also in the nation as far as foreclosures and crimes and things like that. But I am very proud to say I grew up and went to all the schools in East Cleveland. And, actually when I began my law practice, that's what kind of gave me the passion to pursue criminal defense, because so many people in the community where I grew up were being caught in the legal system. And I said to myself, they need a voice. They needed a person who's going to defend them with integrity, and that's what I set out to do. So growing up in East Cleveland kind of gave me that extra push once I decided to go into law.
Wow. Wow. Now, you're married, and you have her wife, Elsie. Is that your wife's name?
Yes, my wife, Elsie, and I have a 9-month daughter named Aria.
Oh, how pretty. That's nice. Now, and for those Cleveland listeners, for our Cleveland listeners who are listening, if the name Dawson sounds familiar, yes, he is the brother of the well-known news anchor, Mr. Wayne Dawson.
Yes.
And your brother is undoubtedly one of the best anchors in the city of Cleveland.
Yeah, he's been on the air over 20 years here at the same station, which is really amazing.
Okay. Now, everything that I've read about you, especially as it pertains to, your position as a defense attorney, you appear to be very passionate about educating individuals about the legal system, whether young people, old, whatever. How important is it to you that people are informed about the legal system?
It's very important. Let me tell you what's very interesting. I began my practice, and it was so quick for me to realize that so many people get caught in the legal system without knowing anything about it. And so I said to myself, if people are going to make decisions that are going to affect their lives, take away their liberty, then they need to make informed decisions. Because, I know for a fact growing up in East Cleveland, I wasn't aware of the laws. I wasn't always Attorney Dawson. I made a lot of mistakes and did some things I'm not necessarily proud of. But I will say I didn't have that knowledge to know that, okay, yeah, you know right from wrong, but you don't know how bad it can get if you continue to do wrong. So I said to myself, I have to provide some type of education. It's not enough just for me to defend people in the courtroom. I want to keep them from coming to this point of being in the courtroom. And that's kind of what led me to write the book, The Legal Matrix, which was my first effort, just to kind of get the word out on how to avoid the traps of the legal system.
Yeah, I was looking at your book title. I didn't get a chance to order it yet, but I just want to let our listeners know that we will have a link onto our website so that you can get the book, and also that you can get the book on your website. We'll be getting that a little bit later, and that it sounds like it's an excellent tool, an excellent resource for someone to have so that they can understand, the ins and outs of the legal system. Now, you also have a program that also helps in this regard. And we're going to talk about that in a little depth a little bit later, but first, I wonder if we could just go over a couple of terms. I often hear these terms floating around, and I have to admit I'm not I'm not an expert, and some of the people listening probably know. But can you tell me what's the difference between a felony and a misdemeanor?
Okay, and you know what? Real quick, I do want to tell you that once I get your mailing information, I'm going to send you a book. You don't have to worry about ordering it. I want you to have it.
Oh,
so don't
great.
worry about that at all.
Thank you.
Felony, no, you're welcome. Felony and a misdemeanor. The misdemeanors, it really goes by two kind of areas. Misdemeanors are crimes against a particular city. So, for instance, East Cleveland, Cleveland, Lyndhurst, wherever you live in any state in the country, the cities have their own laws. And if you break the city laws, they're normally misdemeanors. And those are capped by the amount of money that you can be punished. In the city of Cleveland, state of Ohio, it's up to $1,000 fine and up to 90 days in jail. Whereas felonies, that's the next level where you can be fined anywhere between $25,000 or more, and you can spend anywhere from, a year and a half all the way up to life in prison. So basically, the important difference between a felony and a misdemeanor is the amount of fines you're going to have to pay and the amount of time you're exposed to as far as jail.
Wow. Now, in terms of someone's record, I mean, you wouldn't want a record in any case, but you often hear people say, well, you really don't want a felony record. I mean, is there a difference as far as somebody having a misdemeanor record or a felony record? Or?
Yes. Basically, I guess the prejudice, so to speak, is that felonies are more serious. Because if you really look at some of the city statutes, misdemeanors normally cover things like petty theft, simple assault, things like that. Some domestic violences when they first occur, your first time, DUIs, traffic offenses. But when you're looking at felonies, you're looking at situations where there may be a serious assault called felonious assault. You're looking at a burglary or a robbery, and like all the way up to murders. So what happens is if you have a felony, it turns on that signal that, okay, this person has done something that the legal system considers very serious, more than just a slap on the wrist. So that's the general ideal of I'd rather have a misdemeanor than a felony. But unfortunately, in today's economy and in today's job market, it's just as bad to have a misdemeanor.
Because you often hear about the job situation. They always ask you on an application, do you have a felony? But either one's bad, but of course the felonies is a lot worse. Yes.
Felonies normally indicate that you may have done some jail time or been exposed to jail time, whereas a lot of times misdemeanors, it could be anything, and sometimes that's why my programs and learning about the legal system is important, sometimes, you will plead to something just to get the case over with in a misdemeanor situation. So it's a little easier if an employer looks at it and say, okay, I have a misdemeanor, maybe they'll ask you what was it about. They'll give you that opportunity to explain it. So that helps.
Now, sometimes you'll hear the term, this is another word that I've always wondered about, expunged. What does it mean to have your record expunged?
That means that technically having your record expunged is certain people cannot look at your record. It doesn't mean that the case didn't occur. It doesn't mean that you were never convicted, but it means that employers, certain agencies, they can't, when they pull up your record, it won't show. That's one thing about the expungement. The catch-22 is certain people still can see your record, and a lot of people don't realize that. Prosecutors can still see your record, judges, police officers, so they'll still see it. But the good thing is that employers, educational institutions, they can't see your record. So essentially, your record is being wiped clean when you get a record expunged.
Wow. Now, if someone's an attorney, you would, of course, that's one of the things that, along with other things you try to do to have somebody's record expunged, if at all possible, you certainly try to do that. I think a lot of people don't realize that you can do that or that's available.
Well, a lot of people don't realize it, but what's interesting, and another thing that's kind of frustrating to me as an attorney, because, we have such a bad reputation. I really try hard to lead and to conduct my business with integrity. That doesn't mean that every case is going to be perfect, that, every client's going to be happy with you. But no one's going to be able to say William Dawson, ripped me off or didn't give me the correct information. So what happens when we hear this expungement thing, it kind of frustrates me because I think the people who are aware of expungement, they're getting a little bit of misleading information. So, for instance, there'll be these big expungement expos here in Cleveland, whether it's at a church or a courthouse. It'll say, come and get your record expunged. And that can be done for several reasons. It could be political reasons because a judge or someone wants to look like they're helping, or it could be, somebody wants you to come out and just recognize them in the community. But what happens is you come to these forums and you realize there are so many restrictions to the expungement that I would say on an average day, maybe 30% or less people can actually get the expungement. The requirements are so strict that most people actually cannot get the expungement, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, that's interesting to know. I noticed that you, in reading some of the information that you had, you really stressed the importance of how to avoid negative interaction with the police. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I think, based on just my knowledge and my representation of so many people, and even some of the research, that's been going on in the Cleveland Municipal Courts, we've come to the conclusion that a lot of times people have cases brought against them, charges, because they have negative interaction with police officers. And I think even in, I don't want to say the black community, but I think it's more of a class. First I'll say black community, but then I'll say it's more of a class situation where no matter what your race is, some of us tend to dislike police officers, and therefore when they come in your community or you come in contact with them, that interaction, they seem to butt heads because it's, there's this dislike for police officers, yet there's this need to have control and to have order. So what happens is too many people are getting cases because they just don't know how to interact with police officers. A lot of times you can avoid being arrested, avoid being charged if you just approach that initial interaction in a certain way.
And I know for myself, if I'm pulled over, you get a little upset and you think, oh, gee, am I going to get a ticket? And you may be mumbling under your breath at some of the things that you want to say. But I think it does matter a lot how, they're here to actually protect and defend, and we shouldn't be so quick to fly off at the handle. I think sometimes that does happen.
Yes, and it's interesting. In some of the seminars I